Over a century ago, a ship set sail that was more than just a vessel. It was a symbol of human ambition, a floating palace of luxury and technological prowess. She was called the RMS Titanic, and her creators, her passengers, and the world believed she was unsinkable. This is the story of her one and only voyage, a journey that began with celebration and ended in one of the most infamous tragedies in maritime history. In the early 20th century, the world was alive with innovation. The race to build the biggest, fastest, and most luxurious ocean liners was fierce. The White Star Line, a prominent British shipping company, wanted to dominate the transatlantic route. Their answer was the Olympic-class liners, and the crown jewel was the Titanic. Construction began in 1909 in Belfast, Ireland. It took over 2 years and thousands of workers to bring this colossal dream to life. When she was finished, she was a marvel, nearly 900 feet long, as tall as a 17-story building, and weighing over 46,000 tons. Her interior was opulent, designed to rival the finest hotels in Europe, with grand staircases, elegant dining rooms, a swimming pool, and even a Turkish bath. On April 10, 1912, the atmosphere in Southampton, England, was electric. Crowds gathered to witness the start of Titanic's maiden voyage. Aboard were over 2,200 people, a microcosm of society. First class, you had some of the wealthiest people in the world, like John Jacob Astor IV and Benjamin Guggenheim. Second class was filled with professionals, teachers, and clergy. In third class, or steerage, were hundreds of immigrants, families from across Europe chasing the promise of a new life in America. For them, Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a chariot to their dreams. The first few days at sea were smooth and uneventful. Passengers settled into the routine of ocean travel, enjoying the ship's unprecedented luxury. The weather was clear, the sea was calm. But as the Titanic steamed further into the North Atlantic, a hidden danger lurked in the icy waters. The ship had received multiple warnings from other vessels about large ice fields ahead. However, for a combination of reasons, confidence in the ship's design, a desire to make good time, and perhaps a breakdown in communication, these warnings didn't raise the alarm they should have. The ship continued at a brisk speed of about 22 knots, slicing through the dark, frigid ocean. The night of April 14th was eerily still. The sea was as flat as glass, which ironically made it harder to spot icebergs, as there were no waves breaking at their base. The air temperature dropped close to freezing. High up in the crow's nest, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee scanned the horizon. Their visibility was hampered by the moonless night and the fact that their binoculars were, for reasons still debated, locked away. Then, at 11:40 p.m., Fleet saw it, a dark mass dead ahead. It was an iceberg. He rang the warning bell 3 times and telephoned the bridge, shouting, "Iceberg, right ahead." First Officer William Murdoch, on duty at the bridge, immediately ordered the ship to be turned hard to starboard and the engines to be reversed. It was a race against time and physics. The massive ship began to turn, but it was too slow, too late. A sickening, grinding shudder ran through the hull as the underwater spur of the iceberg scraped along the starboard side for about 10 seconds. On the upper decks, many passengers barely felt it. Some thought a propeller blade had broken. But below the waterline, the damage was catastrophic. The iceberg had punched and buckled the steel plates, opening up at least 5 of the ship's 16 watertight compartments to the sea. The ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was on board. After a quick inspection of the damage with Captain Edward Smith, he delivered the grim verdict. The Titanic could stay afloat with 4 compartments flooded, but not 5. He calculated she had, at most, an hour or 2 before she would sink beneath the waves. The unsinkable ship was doomed. Panic was slow to set in. First, many passengers didn't believe the ship was in serious danger. The crew began the difficult task of mustering passengers on deck and preparing the lifeboats. But a fatal flaw in the plan soon became apparent. The Titanic carried only 20 lifeboats, enough for just over half the people on board. This was technically compliant with the outdated regulations of the time, but it was a death sentence for hundreds. The first distress rockets were fired just after midnight, streaking into the dark sky, a desperate plea for help. The evacuation began, but it was chaotic. The protocol was women and children first, but in the initial confusion, many lifeboats were launched partially empty. Some passengers refused to leave the perceived safety of the massive, well-lit liner for a small boat on the dark, freezing ocean. As the ship's bow dipped lower and lower into the water, the angle of the deck grew steeper, and the reality of the situation became terrifyingly clear. On the deck, amidst the rising chaos, stories of incredible bravery and heartbreaking sacrifice unfolded. The ship's band, led by Wallace Hartley, famously played on, their music providing a surreal, calming soundtrack to the unfolding horror. Wealthy men like Isidore Straus, owner of Macy's department store, refused a spot on a lifeboat. Choosing to stay with his wife Ida, who in turn refused to leave him. She reportedly said, "We have lived together for many years. Where you go, I go." They were last seen sitting together on deck chairs as the ship went down. By 2:05 a.m., the last lifeboat had departed. Over 1,500 people were still on board, left to face the inevitable. As the bow plunged deeper, the stern rose high out of the water, revealing the giant propellers. The lights flickered one last time and then went out, plunging the ship into total darkness. Then, with a deafening roar of metal tearing apart, the immense stress on the hull caused the Titanic to break in two between the third and fourth funnels. The stern section settled back in the water for a moment before rising vertically. And then, at 2:20 a.m. on April 15, 1912, it slipped beneath the surface of the Atlantic, disappearing forever. The water was a horrifying 28 degrees Fahrenheit, or -2 degrees Celsius. For the hundreds of people thrown into the sea, survival was nearly impossible. Their cries for help filled the night air, a sound that would haunt the survivors in the lifeboats for the rest of their lives. Only one lifeboat went back to try and rescue people from the water, but they were too late for most. About an hour and a half after the Titanic sank, the RMS Carpathia arrived. It had raced through the same ice field at full speed after receiving the Titanic's distress call. The crew and passengers of the Carpathia worked tirelessly to pull the 705 survivors from the lifeboats. They were greeted with a mixture of shock, grief, and profound relief. But for the more than 1,500 souls who were lost, their journey had ended in the icy depths. The sinking of the Titanic sent shockwaves around the world. It was a story of human arrogance humbled by nature. It led to major reforms in maritime safety, including the requirement for ships to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board and the establishment of the International Ice Patrol. The wreck of the Titanic lay undisturbed on the ocean floor for over 70 years, a silent memorial nearly 2.5 miles down. It was finally discovered in 1985 by a team led by Dr. Robert Ballard. Its discovery opened a new chapter in the Titanic story, allowing us to see the ghosts of the great ship and continue to piece together the events of that tragic night. The story of the Titanic endures not just because of the scale of the disaster, but because of the human stories it contains. Stories of love, sacrifice, and the fragility of life. It serves as a powerful and timeless reminder that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, we should never underestimate the power of nature and always prioritize human safety above all else. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious. It was the largest moving object ever built by human hands. A marvel of modern engineering, a floating palace of luxury and technology. They called it Unsinkable. But on a calm, moonless night in April 1912, the RMS Titanic would meet its tragic fate, creating a story that has captivated the world for over a century. How did this titan of the seas, on its very first voyage, end up at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean? Let's dive deep into the night the unsinkable ship sank. The story begins in Belfast, Ireland, where the Titanic was constructed by Harland and Wolff shipbuilders for the White Star Line. It was one of 3 Olympic-class ocean liners designed to dominate the transatlantic passenger trade. The sheer scale was breathtaking, nearly 900 feet long, with a gross tonnage of over 46,000 tons. It boasted amenities that were unheard of at the time: a heated swimming pool, a gymnasium, squash courts, and lavish first-class suites that resembled rooms in a grand hotel. The ship was a symbol of progress, of human ambition, and of the Gilded Age's confidence in technology. Its watertight compartments and remotely activated doors were so advanced that one publication famously declared it practically unsinkable. This phrase would soon become tragically ironic. On April 10, 1912, the Titanic set sail from Southampton, England, on its maiden voyage to New York City. On board were over 2,200 people. This was a cross-section of society itself. In first class, you had some of the wealthiest people in the world. John Jacob Astor, for an American real estate mogul. Benjamin Guggenheim, a mining magnate. And Isidore and Ida Strauss, owners of Macy's department store. Second class was filled with professionals, teachers, and clergy, enjoying a level of comfort that would have been considered first class on other ships. And in third class, or steerage, were hundreds of immigrants from across Europe, full of hope and dreams, seeking a new life in America. For them, the Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a vessel carrying them toward a better future. For the first few days, the voyage was smooth and uneventful.